Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Arleta. So happy to be with you.
Welcome back. Gosh,
Yeah,
how long? I can't even, I should probably should have looked this up before we recorded.
yeah.
How long has it been? I think we did your first interview. This is your second go round. I think we did yours around the same time we did mine, and that was like 5 years ago. Is that true?
I think so.
Holy
We'll have
smokes.
to fact check it. We can fact check it, but that
Okay, well,
sounds
fact.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a journalist thing to do, but you put some fact checking. Oh my gosh. And you're the host of the Way Out podcast. How long have you been doing that now?
Over 7 years.
Wow. So did you start in 2016?
Yes.
Me too. I didn't
What?
realize we started at the same time. Yeah, I started June of 2016. I wasn't super consistent at first because I was doing a second podcast. This is actually my second podcast. So I was trying to do two and I finally had to drop the other one.
Right. Right. Yeah, we started in April
Oh
of
man.
2016.
Do you remember when in April?
I can check.
All right, well that's not important. I was just
No.
my
But yeah,
sober.
sometime in April was
Yeah.
the first episode of the Way Out podcast in 2016. So that's funny.
Yeah, and we have about this. Well, you have actually significantly more interviews than I do. I'm a little over 300. I'm at like 307 or something like that. But
We just dropped episode 383. Yeah.
383. So you guys were working faster than I was. 383. Well, congratulations. That is a lot of work. You're doing
It is.
a lot of good in the world and reaching a lot of people. So congratulations.
Arlita, you know how much work a podcast
Oh
is.
my God. It is so much work. I
Yeah.
spend hours and
Yes.
hours. It's not just the talking to the person. That's like the least amount of time. It's the looking for guests or screening guests. Do you get a lot of requests? Like, do you get
Oh
a lot of
yeah.
PR pitches?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually am very lazy about, I just pick from the pitches that I get. I don't
I know,
actively.
and
That's
yes,
not terrible.
it is, and I totally relate to that, Arlita. And Jason's good about proactively searching out guests. God
Oh, he
bless him.
does.
So that's
Yeah.
great. I love him like a brother.
Yeah. Your
And he does,
co-host.
you bet, my co-host Jason Rudine. I, on the other hand, just field so many requests that it's a process of weeding out the ones that aren't a good fit and focusing on the ones that are a good fit. And we're in a
Yeah.
very fortunate position to get a lot of requests. It wasn't like that in the beginning. Okay. I had
Same.
to hunt people down and beg them to come on the podcast.
Yeah.
You know?
So were you asking people in your 12-step community?
Yep.
They're very resistant.
Yep.
They don't understand the whole, like if you go to AA.org, it's actually like you can go on, you can
Podcast.
speak publicly about it, just don't use your last name,
Right.
right? You can speak publicly on stage, don't use your last name,
You bet.
or don't say that you're a member. It's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear. And if you use your last name, don't say AA.
Yeah. You can say 12 step.
You can say 12 step.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I approach it is I
Yeah.
keep my specific program of recovery anonymous,
Yeah.
private,
Yeah.
and I recover out loud with my first and last name.
Yeah.
And then if you come to me one on one and ask how I got better, I'm going to tell you.
Hmm.
I'll tell you everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the same. Because it's, you want to respect the traditions
Absolutely.
and they're also not laws. So
They're not. No, they're traditions, and I do
yeah,
respect them, and I do honor them, and I do get why
I do
they're
too. Yeah.
there. I do not want to be the face of a particular recovery program. That's not my
No,
motive
no.
for the podcast, is to share powerful recovery stories and power topics so people can be inspired and informed in their own
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah.
That's all, right? And we elevate and celebrate all pathways to recovery.
Yes, sir. Yes, we do. I don't speak badly of anybody's methods. There are a couple of things that don't sit well with me. Like I'm uncomfortable with people who teach moderation
Mm-hmm.
as like the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. I'm sure that
Yeah.
I feel like it's important to answer the question, can I moderate? And for me, the answer was no, but that doesn't mean I have talked to people, I've even interviewed people who are able to moderate. And I'm
Yeah, you
like,
bet.
okay, that's just where you're at on the scale. And okay, like
You got it.
I don't know. I don't pretend to know what's right for anyone.
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes I do, but then I go, oh, that's right. It's none of my business. Sometimes I get all, "Rrr." It's not funny.
Oh, I love that.
I think I know what's right for you. Wait a minute. No, I don't.
Right.
Humility kicks in.
Yes.
Hey, I like to start these conversations with a fun little game called the lightning round. I don't think I was doing this when I interviewed you the first time.
You were not.
No, I was not, but it's don't panic. It's very slow. And I know you're just gonna knock it out of the park because you're like me, you're a seeker. And those of us that are seekers, we like books. We like to educate ourselves. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, what was your maybe early on in recovery, was there a book that really helped you?
Yeah, there was a few early in recovery that had a big impact. Certainly, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was transformational for me in terms of understanding the nature of my condition and what the solution was. I would say outside of that, Drop the Rock.
Hmm.
In early recovery was incredibly transformational for me.
Can you sort of give the highlight or the overview of what Drop the Rock is about?
Yeah, you bet. So Drop the Rock really focuses on steps 6 and 7 in the 12-step program and do a wonderful job illustrating why that process within the 12 steps is important and how practically those can be applied in our lives. And it stems from a analogy in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in that and I can't remember exactly where it is, but there's a great analogy around and maybe this is just actually in Drop the Rock. So, but there's a great analogy around a woman who has gone through steps 1 through 5 and is on her way to the promised land, right? So she's swimming to all of her 12-step buddies who have completed all of the steps and are continuing to work the 12 steps in their lives. And they're on this wonderful island, right? Of serenity and peace. And let's call her Jane. Poor old Jane is struggling to get there. She's going under the water and then she pops back up, and she's going under the water and she pops back up. And all of her friends that have made it to the other side, Jane, drop the rock. She's got a big rock around her neck and it keeps bobbing her down. And then she pops back up and then bobbing her down. And I didn't even realize she had this thing around her neck the whole time. She's been carrying it around her whole life. It just
Hmm.
had always been there. And they keep, drop the rock, Jane, drop the rock. And she thinks about it for a minute, says, this thing's weighing me down. I've had it all my life, but I'm going to trust that if I drop this, I can make it to the other side. She drops the rock and she makes it to the other side. And it's such a great way to describe what that process feels like, to shed these counterproductive thought and behavior patterns that were no longer serving me, the things that I identified in 4 and 5. And the big book proper doesn't spend a lot of time
Mm-mm.
on 6 and 7. It's a very short
Like a
amount.
paragraph, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Now the 12 and 12 does
Right.
goes in more depth too, but and so shedding these counterproductive thought and behavior patterns so that I can continue to experience the things that are promised us in the 12-step program.
Right.
And I can't get to those if I'm constantly being dragged down and sort of stuck back into those counterproductive thought and behavior patterns.
Yeah. No, thank you for explaining that. I think the rock is very symbolic of coping skills that are no longer serving us. And I feel like the steps are a way of identifying what those coping skills are. They frame it. How do you feel about the terminology? Because the terminology can be problematic for some people, where they call it character defects. And, we're going to talk a little bit about the broader sober community, where there's a lot of people that really bristle at the idea of character defects.
Sure, absolutely.
I like
Yeah.
to think of them as human frailties. I don't know if that's written anywhere, but
Yeah, it's interesting. I try not to get caught up in the nomenclature, but yeah, character defects does definitely have a negative connotation. They also refer to them as shortcomings
Mhm.
in the 12-step program and in the 12 steps proper. And so when I learned that these character defects, if you will, or shortcomings, if you will, human frailties, counterproductive thought and behavior patterns is typically what I like to refer to
I
them
like
as.
that.
These are my natural instincts that have gone awry. And everybody has these natural instincts.
Yeah.
And mine have gotten to the point where they're hurting myself and they're hurting other people. And that's at which the point they become a problem for me. And I need to address them and I need to let them go. I
Yeah.
need to work with my higher power to let them go. And
Drop the
that's
rock.
that's it. Drop the rock. So it was less of a process of trying really hard not to do it, because I had done that before
Yeah.
with varying degrees of success and sustainability. Just try really hard not to do this.
The sustainability is the tricky part.
You got it. And I could do it for a short period of time, but I could not sustain it for any
Mhm.
length of time.
Yeah.
Trying really hard to just didn't work for me.
Through gritted teeth.
You
Um,
got it.
for those who aren't really familiar, can you sort of give an overview of what the instincts are that are out of balance? Because
Yes.
I feel like it's really important to be like really specific. Because when I first got sober, I was like, "What are y'all talking about?" They kept saying, "Do the work," and I was like, "What is
Yeah.
the work? What does
Absolutely.
that mean? Tell me."
Instincts for security,
Mhm.
instincts for whether that be financial, emotional. So maybe I have a tendency, theoretically, hypothetically,
You're just gonna out yourself right now.
yeah, just
Go ahead.
hypothetically, I have a
Okay.
tendency to uh, uh, hoard money, hoard it because
Okay.
because I grew up
Mm,
in a family that didn't have a lot of money after my mom died, and I knew what that felt like, and it was scary
yeah.
to feel like we were going to lose everything.
Oof.
And
Financial
then maybe
insecurity.
in you bet. And then so maybe I in my life decided that, money was going to be really important to my overall well-being, and I needed to make sure that I always had enough of it.
Hmm.
And so that's normal to want to be financially secure. That's a natural human desire. What's not healthy is when uh, it gets to the extreme where I am suffering needlessly and
Like,
causing other people to suffer needlessly because I'm choosing to live like a peasant, right? And make myself suffer and other people suffer unnecessarily. My natural
unnecessary.
instinct has gone awry.
Listen, that is like, I don't know who doesn't relate to the need for security,
You
right?
bet. You
Yeah.
bet. And
Yeah.
so in recovery, I got to identify that, and then I got to understand the root of it was I was terrified that I
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
okay, that I would
Yeah.
not be okay, and that money was going to make that okay.
Hmm.
And understanding that so long as I continue to do the next right thing and I prioritize the things that matter the most, which is my higher power, my recovery, and my relationships with other people, then
Yes, that's the
I'm going to be okay no
solution.
matter what. Okay. And I can still make sure that, I'm not, spending like a drunken sailor and, spending myself out of house and home, and bring that into a more balanced state by letting go of the fear.
By letting go of the fear, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
It's so I'm so glad you brought up the financial insecurity piece, because mine shows up in like workaholism and like self-denial, or like, and I just did it again. I've been sober for so long, almost okay, 29 years. No fronts, no fronts. But so I grew up with a lot of financial insecurity and a lot of messaging, like we don't have the money, and wanting things is selfish, and all that stuff. And so I developed a touch of workaholism. I've had two jobs my entire life. Like I'm never happy with just one job.
Right.
So just-
Right.
and then sometimes my second job I do for free, which is so foolish, with sort of like this promise of money later. Do you know what I mean? Do you know?
Yes.
So like this total, I mean, the podcast is a great example of that. Don't give me that look. But I will deny, like I will work really hard and deny myself the practices that keep me sane. Like I'll sacrifice my self-care in order to work more for the illusion of promise of money later, but later never comes.
Yeah.
Like I always kick the can down the road, and pretty soon I end up in that. So my cycle is a pattern that ends up in burnout, and then I can't do anything for a while.
Yep.
It's, it's
Absolutely.
hilarious. It's so funny.
And there's other natural instincts that can run riot. It can be around emotional security
Oh
and
yeah.
safety, and that can show up in
Oh,
relationships,
that's a big one.
and understanding the root of that. And
Yeah.
for me, that was a process of understanding how I showed up in relationships and failed to show up in relationships, and what fear was driving that. And
Yeah.
for me, the fear was you're going to go away because that's what always happens.
Hmm.
And so as soon as I detect anything that's amiss, I'm going to go into a really counterproductive behavior pattern to sabotage the relationship,
Right.
and sort of end it on my terms rather than risk the emotional vulnerability of you leaving first. right?
Right. Yeah, which
Um,
becomes then a self-fulfilling prophecy.
sure does. You get it.
Oh, the joys of recovery, all this
Indeed, but
awareness.
that's the things, the shame around it really got demolished when I understood that these are natural human desires
Yeah.
that just got a little out of whack for me, and for good reason.
And for good reason.
And
Yeah.
so then it's about understanding which ones have gotten out of whack and then working with my higher power to let go of the fear that's driving that counterproductive thought and behavior pattern, knowing that it's not serving me today.
So I'm glad that you brought up the higher power because I'm very like pragmatic. And I know a lot of people are like, well, how does that actually work? Because there's a lot of, I don't think people realize the power that's in surrender,
Oh,
right? Letting go, like,
yeah.
I see it in metaphysical spaces where they're like, oh yeah, if you chase something, you're bringing with it this like needy energy that actually like this grasping, desperate energy that actually repels the thing that you want. So in my case, like I always think that money is going to fix everything. I don't know if you
Yes.
feel or relationships or whatever,
Right.
but so they say, oh, you need to surrender and, it's God's will. And like all this is very, very confusing to a lot of people that in the very beginning where they're like, because we do talk a little bit about powerlessness over alcohol in the 12 step. And I think people get hung up on the word powerless. And so how do you sort of reconcile this idea that we do have power of choice and that we can ask for help? Like how does that all fit for you?
So coming into recovery this last time,
How long ago was that?
just over 9 years ago.
9 years. Okay.
My
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. My sobriety date's December 6th, 2014. It was my third official attempt at recovery. And I received that gift of desperation
Mm, which is a
coming.
good thing.
It is a good thing. It was necessary for me. And I
Me
think
too.
about that in terms of, we talk about in the 12-step program that three things are indispensable as we traverse our journey in recovery: honesty, open mindedness, and willingness. And that was
Yes.
true for me. I needed to have that willingness to do whatever it took to get better. And I received that through that gift of desperation.
Yeah.
And then being completely honest about the true nature, scope, and scale of my alcoholism and addiction, which meant for me two things. Number one, over any length of time, my alcohol and substance use will become unmanageable. And I
Yeah.
proved that to myself over and over and over again. In a DWI, a lost relationship, some sort of internal consequence, and also over any length of time, I cannot remain sober by myself without help. Can't do it. I could do it for a little while, but I
Mm,
cannot sustain so- sobriety without help and without a solution. I'll become increasingly restless, irritable, and discontent, and I will feel like I have no other choice but to hit that proverbial eject button and escape through a substance, an addictive behavior, something.
mm,
So that was the honesty piece. And it took a long time to get there because I really felt for many years I could have the substances, the alcohol in my life and manage them. And everything was cool. Like I had my stuff, I had the house, I had the cars, I had the job, I had everything on the outside. So I was maintaining that appearance of manageability. Well, in reality and behind closed doors, my alcohol use was spiraling out of control, and
Mhm.
my mental health was spiraling out of control. My physical health was spiraling out of control. And getting to that place of finally, to your point, surrendering to the fact that I cannot control my alcohol use, primarily at the end. There's many other things. Alcohol for sure is what was my first love and my ultimate downfall.
Yeah.
And the 12 steps laid that out so well, in that it defined my problem, which was an obsession of the mind. When I wasn't drinking, that's all I really wanted to do was drink.
Yeah.
And when I did drink, I took the first drink, then the drink took the drink, and then the drink took me. And so that
More.
was the second piece. Yeah, you bet. I could not predict once I started when I was going to stop. And so those two pieces for me were very, very true. And I had to be really honest with myself about that. And then the open-mindedness to be able to start doing things that didn't seem to make sense in the beginning.
Which there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that. Like I was as as skeptical as anybody
Nice.
around the 12 steps. Okay. Certainly the first time, the second time, and the third time. The difference of the third time was I was ready to try anything. Like,
You
even
had the
if it sounded,
willingness.
you bet, I had the willingness. That was indispensable. Like, this sounds pretty nutty still.
But
Okay.
my way is
However,
not working.
comma, I've proved many times over that my way did not work. That got me here. Okay. So, and I listened to a lot of Joe and Charlie in the beginning. And again, I really believe, I say it
Join
all the time
Charlie
on my,
tapes.
I love them. And they're funny and they're relatable. And I say it all the time on the Way Up podcast that I really believe it took Bill and Bob to write the big book and Joe and Charlie to explain it.
Oh, interesting. So are the Joe and Charlie tapes available like on YouTube?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to check that out because every time I talk to you, listen, you're just like you have such a good grasp on this subject matter that's so relatable. And you always refer to Joe and Charlie. I have to
Yep.
check them out.
Yeah.
I
Joe
can't
and
believe that's
Charlie,
her.
the big book comes alive.
Okay. That's the name of it?
Yes. Yeah. Joe
Okay.
and Charlie, the big book comes alive. And they do such a great job of relating what our fundamental problem is and what the
Hmm.
solution is.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's what the 12 steps are. The
Yeah.
12 steps, step one defines our problem. Steps 2 and 3 define our solution. And 4 through 12 are the solution.
Yeah.
So that made sense to me. And all of a sudden, that, okay, you're saying that step one's my problem. I get that. I'm powerless. I've demonstrated that beyond a shadow of a doubt over alcohol and not
Over alcohol. People get
alcohol,
so hung up. Oh, they say I'm power like over alcohol.
over
It's like,
alcohol.
let's finish the sentence.
You bet. And then I need a new power then.
Yeah.
If I'm unable of my unaided will to be able to manage my alcohol use or stop completely, then I need a new power. And that, again, like, okay, you're telling me. I get that I'm powerless. I finally surrendered to that. I've demonstrated that to myself over and over again.
Carl's a
And clearly
robot.
my life has become unmanageable.
Yeah.
That I'm in.
So
Okay.
what, can we define unmanageability a little bit? Because it's not just getting a DWI or losing a relationship. I think because I would consider you to be a high functioning alcoholic. And we can talk about the word alcoholic. It's nomenclature again, but people get hung up around, but I was listening to a podcast and heard Dr. Judd Brewer talk about continued use over something that has a negative consequence. And I was like, yeah, I think everybody could
Absolutely.
get behind that.
No question. Um, so yeah, we could talk about the whether it's alcohol use disorder or whether it's alcoholic or alcoholism or addict. I identify as an addict and an alcoholic.
Yeah.
That's how I identify. And I also identify as a person in long-term recovery. And
Yeah.
that's what I focus on. I,
Right.
I know at my very core I'm an addict and an alcoholic.
Hmm.
That's and I need to say that out loud on a regular basis because I need that reminder. That's an important part of my recovery program.
I think what's so important about that though, Charlie, is that to talk a little bit about like the science behind it because I feel like if we take it from a scientific perspective, it sort of depersonalizes it in the sense like it's not me that's bad and wrong or defective or blah blah blah. It's an actual scientific fact that if you grow up under stressful circumstances, let's say in a dysfunctional family or whatever, you've had incidences that cause harm. I know you had some stuff, and so did I, that caused harm. It develops how it shapes how your nervous system develops. It sets what's called the default mode network. It's your brain's operating system, right? And it feels to me as if once we get into recovery, we recover our whole selves, right? We become whole, like we recover the good parts, the bad parts, and make peace with it all with sort of compassion and empathy. But what we are still operating with is a nervous system, a mental way of thinking that needs constant adjusting. It's like a plane that flies from San Francisco to Hawaii is off track 90% of the time, but they arrive at their destination because they're continually adjusting to get to their destination. And I feel like that's why we are always going over this material. We go over the solution over and over and over again, the problem and the solution, because it helps to sort of keep us on track.
No question. And I really believe that we're rewiring our brains. And there's
Yeah.
tremendous amount of research going on right now around addiction and alcoholism and what it does to our brains in terms of rewiring it one way and
Mhm.
a way that says this is the solution, this is the answer, this is what is going to make me feel okay.
Break
And
out
our
of those
brains get
patterns
wired
and
that way. And then in
yeah.
recovery, we're rewiring
Yeah.
our
Meditation.
brains.
There's so much research behind the efficacy of meditation and
Absolutely.
it's built right built right in.
Built right in. And the idea around you talked about the trauma and the substance use and ultimately for me becoming very fast an addict and an alcoholic. If I don't, Arlena, say that out loud on a regular basis to myself and other people, I know what happens because I've demonstrated that to myself over and over. What happens is I forget
You
that
go
I'm an
back to your
alcoholic and an
default.
addict. You got it. You got it. And everything's fine for a while, by the way, Arlena, right? So I don't say that I'm an addict or an alcoholic anymore because it's
I'm
uncomfortable
recovered.
and I don't really want to be one. And and I don't go to them meetings anymore. And
Yeah.
my life does not spontaneously combust.
Right.
And then Chuck, my
Alter ego.
inner addict, you get it, is like, hey, you've been sober now for fill in the blank. And you haven't been going to those meetings. You haven't been praying. You haven't been meditating. You haven't been calling yourself an addict. And your life is fine. You're fine. You're fine. That was probably a phase. You were
Yeah,
going
you're
through a
very
rough
young.
time. You were going. There was some
You're
stuff
so
like
young.
yes, it's a different time.
It's a different time.
You know better now.
Isn't it ironic how
You
we
could
all
probably drink and it would probably be fine. And then I just sit on that for a little while and like, you know, knock that around in my head and I might be like, I don't know. That sounds, I don't know, because last time I know, but that was then. You've learned so much.
you've changed.
You've changed. Now you could probably have another and you'd be fine. You could probably drink, you'd be fine. You don't and so then that just sits and then the perfect opportunity will present itself. I'll drink and it's over at that point. One drink is never enough. 1,000 is, whatever, So
Yeah. One's too many, 1,000's not
you
enough.
got it. One is too many, 1,000's not enough, and I'm off the rails again. So that's how that happens to me. So it's a really
Yeah.
important process for me to continue to say that out loud to myself and other people.
Yeah. I love how you break that down because we are the easiest to deceive. We deceive ourselves so easily. It's so, and as you were telling that story, I was laughing because we all have that same internal discussion. We
Yes.
all have that same internal discussion and all the same excuses come up. It's like, oh, but I was really young. I got sober young. Like I got sober when I was 25. I have learned a lot over the last 29 years, hopefully. But it's just like we wouldn't expect to go to the gym once and stay in shape forever. Even if we went to the gym for a year and we got in good shape, if we stopped going to the gym, we regress back to that default.
No
Right.
question.
And that's how I like to think of it is and my mind will say all the same things that your mind says to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is a degree of vigilance that's required for some of us because, when I first got sober, they told me that if I stayed sober long enough, I would go to a lot of funerals. And that's definitely been the case. I've seen a lot of people die. I'm sure you have too, because this is like a deadly disease. Like people die from this all the time.
Yes, they do.
They die from
Yes,
this
they
all the
do. And
time. So,
it's really pernicious with alcoholism, Arlena, because it's not called that on the death certificate.
oh,
It's
a
called liver
cirrhosis.
cirrhosis or
Yeah. Or
heart
drunk
disease
driving
or you bet
accident or
suicide.
suicide. Yeah. Seen a lot of that. Yeah. It's rarely alcohol poisoning.
Correct.
I went to high
Yeah.
school with this gal who was like on the drill team and super popular and blah 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 and she ends up in the rooms of 12-step rooms and she's sober for quite some time and then she has a family, she has twins. I think she had a total of 4 kids or something like that, like a very full life. And then slowly over time she quit doing the meetings and I wasn't friends with her. Like I don't know what happened to her, except that she had relapsed and died of alcohol poisoning, and her husband and twins found her on the couch.
Oh wow.
And it's so I get why people in 12-step rooms are so hyper vigilant and traumatized and maybe we can talk a little bit about like there was a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about. Like I was taking notes, but I think it's so interesting. I have such mixed feelings about how the recovery space is evolving.
Mm,
Like I feel like we're catching people earlier,
yeah.
uh, which is great. But it's also there's a lot of discussion around, oh, well, you don't have to be that bad in quotes. You don't have to be an alcoholic, or they rail against the word alcoholic because I'm not
Hmm.
that bad.
Hmm.
Um, I'm just doing this because I want to optimize
Right.
my work performance.
Right.
I care about my health. So that, dry Januaries brings a lot of exposure
It
to
does.
this.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have mixed feelings about it because on one hand, I think it's amazing that there are other paths to recovery now.
Yeah.
Which when I got sober, there really wasn't anything else, and I'm kind of grateful for that I only had one choice because
Right.
it did sort of force the desperation component. Um, I was also high functioning, so I didn't have like DWIs or anything like that, but I did feel that internal desperation, like I was dying on the inside. Like think and let's not get it twisted. The outside wasn't looking great either.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the job and stuff, but barely,
That's it.
barely.
That's it. So I did have the DWIs, and I did have most of the external things in place. But to your point, I was hanging on to my job by a freaking thread.
All
And I had
right.
no idea until I got sober. And it was like, I don't know, like 9 months in, and my boss, who's in the program and has been sober forever, he sold the company now, and the new ownership is in place. He told me, he's like, you were literally like
Wow.
days away from being terminated. Like, you were toxic in the
Yeah.
workplace, right? So,
Yeah.
and I had no idea, right? And I
I
don't
thought
know,
I was
I
fine.
thought I was doing great.
You thought you were hiding it well.
And yes, and I thought I was like this just rock star at, like, Mr.
If
Super
the numbers are
talented.
good,
Oh,
everything's fine.
absolutely.
You're a
Like, and
sales guy.
everybody, you bet,
Like me.
you got
That's
it.
so funny. And listen, if you're producing, I was in high tech sales in Silicon Valley and working for companies like HP and Adobe and all these startups
Yep.
and stuff. And alcoholism runs rampant in those circles.
Rampant,
Rampant. And
no
but it was so
question.
funny because management would protect the people
The
that
high
were
producers.
producing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got it.
They'd
Yep.
be like, is there a possibility that you just were hungover from the night before? Is there like
And
they're like feeding them the answers
100%.
to
Look,
say, and they're like, yeah.
yes, that was
Yeah.
the problem.
Success covers a multitude of sins, as they say.
No question. No question. And I've been in IT sales all my life, so worked with many of the
Yeah,
companies
yeah.
that you. So in
Were
the
you data
convention.
storage?
So all facets, right? And
Oh,
so,
okay.
but we were, yeah. So we did storage, but I worked for a value-added reseller for many, many years, and we've
Got it.
transitioned into being a managed IT services
Oh,
provider.
nice.
Yeah. So, all
That's tech
facets.
speak for those who are like,
Yeah.
what the hell is that? It's a whole nother
It's a
language.
whole nother deal.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not important.
No, not particularly.
Yeah, we
Not
don't want to lose
particularly.
people over
No,
geek
not
speak.
particularly. But the reality was is that I was hanging on by a thread in many ways, and what ultimately brought me to surrender was the internal consequences, not the
Mm,
external stuff, not the DWIs, not the impacts from the outside. It was definitely the internal crisis that
self-hatred,
you bet,
self-loathing,
you bet,
yeah,
and
despair.
the demoralization and the despair
Yeah.
around how my behavior and my drinking affected other people and myself. It was no longer avoidable in terms of how damaging it was to myself, my
Mhm.
health, my wellness, and to other people.
Yeah, that I think that having that clarity allows us to get leverage over ourselves to start taking different actions, like the pain is very, very motivating. And how do you feel about like I was saying, I'm glad that there's more discussion in mainstream media about this. There are tons of books now.
Yeah.
There are alternative programs that kind of catch people before they sink too low. That's all good. But I do feel there's a little, it's kind of a double-edged sword because they're saying, oh, you don't have to be that bad. And what they're
Mm.
saying is that the people who are sort of at that lower scales are that bad. Like it's sort of almost shame producing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's all on a spectrum. And even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the 12 by 12, it talks about quote unquote low bottom cases
Yeah.
that got better, and they were
Talk about honesty.
right, and they were mere potential alcoholics, right? So even in the 1930s and 40s, when this material was written, they were dealing with this same kind of idea around, can you recover if you have not lost everything, if you've not gone all the way down to the absolute bottom? And
Rock bottom.
by the way, I don't believe in rock bottoms. I've interviewed so many people at this point that I have come to the firm belief and understanding that there are no rock bottoms. Your bottom is when you stop digging.
Mm-hmm.
Anything short of that is your entry into recovery, right? And the true rock bottom is death, right?
Yeah.
Anything short of that,
No coming back from
you
that.
stop digging, right? So some people stop digging pretty early, and some people dig. And it's a spectrum from that perspective. I do think, to your point, this idea that well, I'm not, yes, I quit drinking, and yes, I'm sober, but I'm not an alcoholic, does stigmatize
Yeah.
the folks that have
A lower
a
bottom.
lower bottom,
Yeah.
that they're somehow less than, like there's something wrong with them. And
Shameful.
yeah, and you know, and we celebrate all pathways to recovery. We elevate all pathways to recovery, but we do not support a message that says that people that stopped their substance use early are somehow better,
Right.
or somehow, have some sort of, ethical, moral, or some other superiority over somebody that, has gone all the way down to the bottom, and, damn near at the gates of death, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
got better. Both of those recoveries we can learn from. Both of those recoveries are amazing. Both of those recoveries are worth celebrating. And as I just told a sponsee the other day, nothing good can happen out of comparing our recoveries.
Oof. No. Just relating.
Just relating. Right?
Agreed.
Somebody might be at this point in their recovery, but they had a lot farther to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got trauma that they're addressing. They've got mental health that they're addressing. They've got family dysfunction that they're addressing. Maybe there's physical health stuff that they're addressing. And they've done a tremendous amount of work, and they're here. And somebody else might be coming into recovery and not have that many things to address ultimately. And it's a very different thing. So it makes more sense to identify what we have in common and what we can learn from each other, and not try to compare ourselves and our recoveries to other people necessarily, about in terms of
Yeah.
progress and what we've achieved in recovery.
Right. Because that achievement is also sort of supporting that idea that our worth is based on what we do, which is something I fight all the time. And I know that there's going to be people out there listening to be like, well, we have to be honest that there are people that just quit sooner. Like
No
that's
question.
yeah, that's reality. That's honest. I just want to sort of give voice to those people that are just like, yeah, but I I agree. I agree. Yeah,
And
this is why I have
and I
such
call it the not
mixed
yets. Like
feelings
there's
about it.
people that, obviously it's a
Oh yeah, they're
spectrum,
not
right?
yet.
The not yets, right? So okay, you didn't lose X, Y, and Z. You didn't experience X, Y, and Z. For me, I call them the not yets. I too can lose that if I choose to go back out drinking. I too can lose everything. Those are
Yeah.
my not yets.
Yeah. Yeah. You're either an example or a cautionary tale, and
Yeah,
both are actually very valuable.
indeed, they are.
Yeah. 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 So I do, and what I love about 12 step is that it's a peer support group, as well as like these other peer support groups. Where do you see the value in professional support?
I think it's incredibly valuable for certain folks, right? So, for any variety of reasons, going to a peer support group may not be a good fit for somebody. Maybe it's due to profound social anxiety. Maybe it's because the accessibility isn't um, quite there from an in-person peer-to-peer perspective. Now there's virtual meetings everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I just think there's so much value in the in-person
Yeah. There
peer-to-peer.
really is. Yeah.
So maybe you're
I,
you're you're in a place where that's not super accessible.
yeah.
Um,
A lot of
and
what I'm hearing, I wonder if you hear this too when you talk to people in on your podcast. There's people that try to get sober in like a rural community,
mm,
and their local 12-step meetings were very dysfunctional.
yeah,
That's a frequent occurrence, and
it is.
I always distinguish the difference between the fellowship and the actual steps.
Yes.
Because if the people are often the reason people stay or the reason people go.
No question. And I'm fortunate to live in an area where there's many, many 12-step meetings. And I love the saying that there's only you only need two things to start a new 12-step meeting: a resentment and a coffee pot, and the coffee pot's optional.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I love that. So
like
lots of
like
meetings
y'all
where
are
you're at,
screwed
huh?
up. This meeting is terrible. I'm gonna
I'm
go start a
starting
new
my
one. Yeah.
own. Yeah,
Which
I
is
love
such,
that.
to me, a addict alcoholic thing to do,
No, but thank God they do that
A hundred
because
percent, because just if you don't
yeah,
like one, try a different one. You will find one if you're willing that fits you, and there's really nothing like being a part of a group of people that are on the same journey as you, that you feel like are your family, that you feel like are
yeah,
your that not feel like are your true friends. And
yeah,
it's a wonderful, wonderful experience that
yeah,
I've not experienced in any other facet of my life. It is, as they say in the 12 steps, frequent contact with each other and newcomers becomes the bright spot of our lives.
yeah, yeah. Nothing ensures sobriety like intense work with another
Indeed.
alcoholic. Yeah,
Indeed.
I love that. Gosh, we could. I only got through that first question. What do you like? Put that spurt on a whole nother. Let's the whole, we're at the hour. You're gonna have to come back. I feel like there was so much more to talk about. Well, I'm gonna leave a link to your first conversation because that's when we really did get into your story and stuff. But I really felt like we talked about a lot of solution in this.
Absolutely.
And I really just appreciate your grasp of the material so much and the way that you're able to sort of deconstruct some complicated ideas. Like these ideas are not easy. There's a lot of seeming paradox in there, surrender to win and
Yeah.
give turning your will over to a higher power, which really means taking responsibility there's a lot of complicated ideas in recovery, but I like
No
how,
question. Yes.
yeah.
And Arlita, I really believe that the 12 steps did something I desperately needed, and I didn't have any idea that it was doing it until after it got done. And what I mean by that is it straightened out really key relationships that were all twisted up.
Yeah.
First, my relationship with my alcoholism and my addiction. I had to get really honest with that.
Yeah, not
And
easy.
you bet. And so that was the first piece. And then my relationship with a higher power, who I choose to call God. That was all twisted up.
Yeah.
And it straightened that relationship out. And that was a process of praying to a God that I didn't understand, that I had no concept of, because if I could make it up, it wasn't big enough for me. Some people in the 12
Mm.
steps create their own conception of a God, and that works really well for them. And I embrace and celebrate that. That's great. For me, I had to pray to nothing. I had to pray to no concept and experience a radical and fundamental change in how I related to the world by virtue of doing these spiritual
Actions,
actions. So the spiritual actions produced a spiritual change in me. And then
experience, evidence.
you got it. And so it was all about then understanding that I had an experience of a higher power before I even had an understanding of a higher power. And then my relationship with myself,
Mhm.
right? Straighten that relationship out. Now, therapy helped that as well. EMDR therapy. I did those two things in parallel. I truly believe that EMDR therapy and working the 12 steps in order with a sponsor were the secret combination that unlocked my recovery.
Mm.
And then lastly, my relationship with other people.
Yeah.
And so the 12 steps are a design for living that allow me to be able to increasingly have stronger relationships with the God of my understanding, myself, and other people, and ultimately be able to do what I'm here for, which is to be of service and love my brothers and sisters in and out of recovery to the best of my ability.
Oof, that's powerful. That's beautiful. It's so important to know what your purpose is.
Yes.
Yeah. And I found, I remember when I got my 1 year chip, I was like, I was very clear because I had been so immersed in the action part. I was very clear on what my purpose was. Yeah.
Yes, it was a revelation, and I had many revelations as I traversed the 12 steps.
Yes.
But that maybe was the most powerful, was understanding what my actual purpose on this planet is. And I struggled with that mightily. Why am I here? And why am I this way?
Yeah. Why?
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 God,
Why am I?
why?
Why am I this
You
way?
bet.
That
You
is a
bet.
big
It
question.
is a big
And
question, right? And my treatment counselor laughed at me when I asked her that, because what do you want to get out of this deal, Charlie? And said, I want to know why I am the way I am. And she laughed at me. She says, oh,
rude.
okay, let's say it's because your mom died when you were 11. Or let's say it's because you were born with big addict and alcoholic switches. Or a combination of the two. Do you think if you find out why you are the way you are, you'll ever be able to drink normally again? No.
No.
Will you ever be able to use safely again? No. Okay, should we figure out how we get better instead of why you are the way you are? And that's the action piece. Yes, let's do that. And I started to do the things that I saw other people do who had gotten better, right? They thought
Yeah.
like I thought, they felt like I felt, they drank like I drank, they used like I used, and they got better. So I did what they did. And
Action.
the big piece was working that 12-step program along with therapy, those actions,
Mhm.
right?
Mood
And
follows action.
you got it.
We just want to feel better. So mood follows action. So take the right
100%.
action.
No
Yeah.
question.
I still
Yes.
want to feel better.
Well, yeah, you and me both. Yeah, that's real. Yeah.
It
I
really
want to change
is.
my feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only all good all the time. Oh, wait a minute. Is that an instinct that's out of balance?
It is. Yeah.
Damn
Yeah.
it. Little default mode network.
Yes, absolutely. No
Well,
question.
well, this has been such a beautiful conversation. You're gonna have to come back and we'll have to talk some more.
Love it.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
it
I feel
anytime.
yeah, I feel like we didn't get to a lot of the things like um but I feel like we covered a lot of ground today, mostly breaking down concepts that are confusing, that are easy to misunderstand. But
Absolutely.
ultimately, I feel like you provide a lot of context and perspective to these complicated ideas. And maybe people that are skeptical of 12 steps might consider giving it another shot with a different group. Maybe if you've tried it before, and didn't like the group, maybe you can find a different group. But yeah, the hill I will die on is the 12 steps are a worthy endeavor. And sometimes you just need to find the right people to walk you through it. And we're not saying anything like if you do it, you'll stay sober forever, or we're not really saying anything other than you can have, like what you said, like you had a series of revelations about yourself that was transformative, and you've stayed sober for almost 10 years.
You got it, Arlena. And I invite anybody who's listening to run the experiment.
Run the experiment. I got
Run the
that from you
experiment.
last time you interviewed me. I've been saying it. I forgot it was you. It was you that said it.
Run the experiment. If you're not happy with the results, happily refund your misery.
That made me mad when I first
What do you
heard
got to
that.
lose?
Yeah.
What do you got to lose? Run the experiment. Don't judge the process, judge the results.
Ooh. Don't judge the process, judge the results.
You got it.
Yeah, because that kind of speaks to what you were saying earlier, that they asked me to do a bunch of things that didn't make sense at first.
That's right.
Only
That's
until
right.
I ran the experiment
It
did
doesn't
I
have to make
understand.
sense. The spiritual actions that we do and the internal work that we do will have a result, will have an impact.
Mhm.
I don't even have to believe in it.
Yeah. No.
I don't have to in order for it to work. That's the magic behind this work, is as long as I do it to the best of my ability, I could be skeptical of it. It still produced a transformative result.
I love it. I think that's a good place to stop. Just mic
Indeed.
drop it right there.
Done. Done.
Well, thank you for healing the world today.
Arlena, this was an absolute treat.
Yeah, it's always good to be with you. And next time we'll get to the other four questions. I told
This
you,
is what
man,
happens
that
when
was
you get.
the slowest lightning round I've ever done. So good. So good.
This is what happens when you get two beautiful souls in recovery, right? It's the
Yeah,
way it goes, and this was the way it was supposed to be.
that's right. Yeah. I said my little prayer before. I was like, let's just do your will and see what happens.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
it. That's all
that's
that.
it.
And I do this just make sure that I am speaking from the heart,
Hmm.
and that my motive is to help other people, and the rest of it is up to my higher power.
None of my business.
You got it.
All right, my friend, thank you so much for your time today, and I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Arlita.